Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto the strongest angel in high school DxD. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Icarus11 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Sunlight pierced through the stained glass windows that lined the left side of the hallway, casting a kaleidoscopic mural of colors onto the white tile floor beneath her feet. The floor was almost completely silent, locked to all but a select few, and the air had a heavy weight to it, stagnant and deep. It was a hall of endless history, where kings had been crowned and heroes immortalized. It was the room in which the world was ruled. Gabriel placed a hand against the cold surface of the wooden door, her fingers consciously tracing the grooves in the ancient piece. Slowly she took a deep breath, pushing everything deep down that threatened to rise to the surface like a crashing wave, before letting the breath escape her lips slowly. Gabriel knew what she was stepping into, any sign of weakness and she would be eaten alive. Glancing downward to take one final look at herself, Gabriel brushed off a little bit of dust she imagined she saw on the fine white material of her simple dress. Flipping her golden blonde hair which had been elaborately braided earlier that day back over her shoulder, Gabriel looked forward with serious emerald green eyes before pushing open the door. Her wings unfolded with the sound of a thunderclap as soon as she stepped into the room, almost as if announcing her presence as one of the four great seraphs. Each wing was beautiful, a flawless aerodynamic piece of art that glowed amongst the purest white in the universe and seemed to only further the opinion that God's gifts to the angels was the appearance of perfection. Sparking to life like a star above Gabriel's head was her halo, a golden ethereal ring that burned the eyes of anyone with impure thoughts or soul. The pure amount of holy light coursing through the walls of the large auditorium-sized chamber, and radiating off of the single object in the center would have been enough to blind a lesser being. 10 large stone chairs were arranged in a circular formation, each equally distant from the glowing book in the center of the room that seemed to hum gently. A small sad smile appeared reflexively on Gabriel's face as soon as her eyes landed onto the book chronically the final words of her father. The smile soon disappeared as she glanced at the other occupants in the room, half of which were standing and shouting at each other over the book itself, as if trying to purposefully add to the disrespect. Uncharacteristically, Gabriel felt her hands tighten into loose fists, and it was only by taking another deep breath did she manage to unclench her fingers once more. More than half of her brothers were at each other's throats, the anger looking strange on their beautiful angelic faces as light weapons threatened to burn to life at any moment. The loudest of the group was Raphael, who also happened to be the largest of the Seraphim, densely packed muscle covering every inch of his body as his 10 white wings flared to life behind him. Long brown hair tied back into a ponytail, Raphael's face was contorted with rage although his eyes were hidden behind the pitch-black sunglasses he wore and had one of his giant hands wrapped around the collar of his brother, Sandalphon, who seemed just as enraged. Sandalphon was tall just like Raphael, both angels standing at around 6'4", but was not quite as muscular, having always been a more benevolent angel in comparison. That did not stop the platinum blonde angel to glare at his brother with glowing red eyes, his own 10 white wings erupting from his back in retaliation. "You asshole!" growled Sandalphon, his hands clenching into white-knuckled fists. The instant before he was about to swing, Gabriel had seen enough. Eyes clenched shut, Gabriel's voice pierced through the room. "Stop it!" That silenced everyone. 18 eyes glanced over to where she was standing and Gabriel suddenly found herself at the center of attention. "What's happening?" One of the youngest seraphs and perhaps the most feminine-looking of the almost all-male group, Sariel was the first to respond. "Raphael and Sandalphon are having an argument, can't you tell?" The purple-haired angel commented rather sarcastically as he lounged lazily across the armrests of his stone chair, a little smirk on his face that went away when Gabriel leveled a glare at him. Sitting up and swallowing from the strangely terrifying look from the usually nice angel, Sariel lifted his hands to display his innocence. "Raphael wants to up the training levels of the exorcist schools in the church and lower the recruitment age." "What? Why?" Gabriel gasped, her eyes whipping around to land on her younger brothers who all flinched. Even Raphael and Sandalphon separated, silent as they both tried not to look at their sister's ashamed face. Remiel, one of the youngest angels with wavy blonde hair, was the first to recover though, slamming a fist against his palm in anger. "These devils are getting stronger and stronger." His voice softened a little, trying to get a little sympathy from his only older sister. "Their evil pieces have too much power, Gabriel. They're planning for war against us." "It's obvious. The devils are not trying to start a war with us. They still have strife amongst their people since the Devil Civil War," commented another voice nonchalantly. Shaggy green hair covered his eyes and the way he slouched on his chair only seemed to add to the lazy look one of the youngest but also brightest of the angels had mastered. "Shut up, Raguel." Raphael snapped back but only received a yawn from his younger brother. Gabriel crossed her arms, her emerald green eyes practically glowing in frustration. "We can't have child soldiers, Raphael. That goes against Father's teachings. Father's teachings are going to be wiped out at this rate if we don't do something soon," commented another voice. Gabriel whipped around to see who said it, and her eyes widened in surprise. "Uriel, you don't honestly believe that, do you?" One of the eldest and strongest Seraphim, Uriel appeared as a young man in his early 20s with jaw-length purple hair and blue eyes that glowed with heavenly power. Hands folded in front of him, Uriel let out a sigh. The devils have found a way to replenish their numbers since the end of the Devil Civil War, now with other species that are also incredibly powerful. They can even recruit and reanimate humans that were given powers by Father himself, the Sacred Gears. Uriel's voice was cool and silky, with a light cadence that was almost as persuasive as Michael's own. The fallen angels grow larger every day, even if they are the smallest faction, by tempting our pure brethren with offers of lust and wealth. Cold blue met emerald green and Gabriel visibly flinched. Father is gone, Gabriel. We can no longer produce angels. It may take decades, centuries or millennia, but soon, there will be no more heavenly host. Gabriel took a step back, a hand on her chest where her heart beat in shock. Raphael Ramil Serial Uriel, it took all the woman had to avoid letting her eyes water. Have you no faith? No faith that Father had a plan to help us one day? Uriel rubbed his forehead to dull its throbbing. Father is gone, Gabriel. We are all that is left. We must make decisions for ourselves. What of the brave saints? Sandalphon asked, a hand to his chin. All eyes turned to look at Rigel, who sighed, somehow leaning back even further into his chair. Nowhere near ready. The magical complexity required to reanimate another species and combine their genetic code with our own is incredibly difficult. The green-haired genius shook his head in disbelief. As much as I hate to admit, the devil's strongest resource is in their greatest mind. Ajuka Beelzebub is a genius of the highest caliber. Gabriel covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes cast downward in disbelief. So we have no chance? No options? We have to resort to harming children and forcing them to fight instead of enjoying their childhood? The room was silent for a minute, the gravity of the choice sinking into every single heavenly soul in the room. Had they really fallen this far, was the collective thought that passed through every single mind. One man stood up, having been silent almost the entire debate. He could have been Gabriel's twin, as they both shared the same shade of golden blonde hair, and their green eyes both sparkled like deep unexplored forests. Although hers always made her look happy while his were curved in such a way that he looked perpetually sad, garbed in ceremonial golden robes rather than the white casual wear that his siblings wore. That only accentuated the other thing that separated him from the rest of them, and marked him as leader. The 12 golden wings that sprouted from his back and seemed to glow in the orange afternoon sun. Michael clapped his hands together softly and his voice washed over the group like a gentle wave, soothing their worries. We will save this debate for another day. Sunset approaches and it is time for us to rest and return with fresh minds and ideas. Glancing out the window, Gabriel was surprised to see her older brother was right. Despite getting there around noon, an orange sunset was painted against the horizon. Michael was met with 9 nods as his siblings slowly walked out of the room, only now realizing how emotionally draining their debate had been. Gabriel, perhaps the most tired out of the group, brushed off her dress once more before carefully changing direction on the balls of her white sandaled feet. Gabriel, please stay for a moment. She stopped in her tracks, her eyes closing briefly as she took in a deep breath. Slowly she turned back around and walked over to her eldest brother, who had turned his chair to face out toward one of the large windows to catch as much of the sunset as possible. A small smile crossed Gabriel's face. She had always been closest to Michael as he was the closest to her in terms of age as well as the only member of the remaining Seraphim that was older than her. The eldest children of God, they were called, and because of that they held a majority of the responsibility to see that his legacy lived on. Walking past the 9 other stone thrones, she stopped besides the one at the head and placed a hand on the shoulder of the slim individual sitting in it. Yes, Michael? He didn't look up at her, his eyes focused on the setting sun and the hundreds of millions of people living their lives in the heavenly city beneath them. Do you think Father would be disappointed in me? Gabriel shook her head softly. No, he would see that you are trying your hardest. That is all that he would ask for. Her face hardened for a moment before she let out a sigh. The rest of us must try harder as well if we want to protect his message. Seeing her brother nod, Gabriel smiled before turning around and walking out of the room. The moment before the door closed behind her, she heard her brother's melodic voice carry through the room barely above a whisper. Thank you, Gabriel. For the first time since his childhood, Naruto Uzumaki felt alone. Every muscle in his body ached, and every cell burned like he had been set on fire 100 times over. His clothes were torn and cut, the results of the dozens of battles he had partaken in, and simply seemed to dissolve into the ether he floated in, leaving him shirtless. New scars littered his muscular arms and chest, joining old scars and the swirling ink design on his stomach. He looked like a god of war, a hero and warrior who had defended his home at any cost. What a cost it was. Naruto tried to lift a hand but he was simply out of energy, his last-ditch attempt to save his world having cost him much. He and Sasuke were to do battle with a goddess. They both knew this but for some reason, either were frightened. There was simply no time to be scared, no time to doubt their skills and fear of letting the people who relied on them down. There was no time to wonder if they had trained enough, learned enough, said goodbye, or if they could even survive this attempt. If they hesitated, they would die, and so would everyone they loved. Haguro Mwajizan had really hooked the two of them up with some crazy powers and Naruto knew they stood a chance, even against the almost incomprehensible power that stood against them. Engaging Kage Otsutsuki in hand-to-hand combat, Naruto glowed like the blazing midday sun, whereas Sasuke had become the cool steady moon, their combined power slowly eclipsing the woman's solo strength. Naruto had never seen anything like that woman's ninjutsu, or whatever it was before it was ninjutsu, as she teleported them from dimension to dimension, warping reality as she pleased to gain home court advantage every time the two boys adapted. She was faster than anyone he had ever faced, to the point she disappeared every time she moved. Her close-quarters combat was only amplified by her deadly bone techniques, that had taken the life of Obito Uchiha, an enemy-turned-friend who may have been like an uncle to him in another life. She truly was a goddess of battle, a rabid demon who would swallow their world after she tried to destroy them in battle. Naruto had been confident, but as the battle extended, it appeared that Kagaya's near-endless bag of tricks gave her the upper hand after all. The sexy reverse harem technique had failed him. The young reincarnation of Ajura Otsutsuki knew he had to end it there and then. It had taken so much chakra, but Naruto remembered there being no other option. Everything he knew, everything he had built upon throughout his entire life, every gift he had been given and lesson he had been taught culminated in that moment. The first technique he could really call his own signature was the Kage Bunshin, a technique that had been with him ever since that fateful night in the forest on the day he became a ninja. With a motion that had long since become instinctual, Naruto summoned 8 clones that were all cloaked in 6 paths chakra as well. Then came the first legacy Naruto ever received from his father, and an eternal memory of Erosenin, the Rasengan. 9 orbs of wild, almost uncontrollable chakra burst alive in his and his clones' hands, humming softly like the calm before the storm. Naruto remembered closing his eyes and focusing on replicating a feat that even stumped his genius father but had long since become second nature. Finally, Naruto remembered using the gifts from the friends he had made and the legacy of the shinobi no kami to let loose the power of the tailed beasts. Naruto would never forget the look on Kagaya's face as he floated in front of her, holding the equivalent of 9 nuclear bombs in the palms of his hands. The explosion that followed couldn't even be described in words, as the massive amounts of power released literally shook the foundations of the dimension they were in and destabilized the mother of chakra to the very core. Outpoured the 9-tailed beasts, who quickly rushed into the only host that remained around them, Naruto. Invigorated by the almost 10-fold increase to his chakra, Naruto remembered blitzing the still wounded goddess and grabbing her by the neck before she could even react. Sasuke, despite still being somewhat in awe himself, teleported in using the power of his unique Rinnegan, and simultaneously the two placed their markings onto Kagaya. And then it all went wrong. A black blur launched out at the two boys the second they touched the goddess of chakra and latched onto Naruto's arm, biting the golden-clad boy with enough force that Naruto felt like his arm was about to rip right off. The seal had activated, but the damage had been done. Naruto was separated from Sasuke, who simply didn't have the chakra to teleport over to him. Kagaya's head snapped forward, and the second Naruto locked eyes with those pure white orbs of death, the massive killing intent that washed over him almost locked him in his place. Debris had started to fly from the surface of the woman's core dimension and gather around the black hole that had begun to form around Kagaya's body as the technique began. The ancestor of chakra knew she was going to be sealed, but wasn't intent on dying alone a second time. Her white kimono billowed, and a true seeking ball flew from the woman's sleeve, striking Naruto in the stomach so hard it knocked the air out of him and shot him backwards so hard he was sure he heard a sonic boom. With a final look back at his strongest enemy, Naruto remembered her Rinne Sharingan glowing a dark crimson before a portal appeared around him. A segmented cut into reality that seemed to close just as the last of the debris formed a final moon around Kagaya. That was all it took. A last-second suicide attack that sent Naruto rocketing through space-time with no destination. And so he floated, a dying hero in the gap between worlds. Practically motionless, Naruto smiled a sad smile. He did as he had intended. He saved the world and honored the legacy of his father and godfather. Hopefully, now that Kagaya was sealed along with Black Zetsu, the world would be at peace just as Naruto had always wished. The shinobi nations were united and would hopefully defend their new peace. Madara had been sent to the afterlife for a final time, and Obito would hopefully rest with Rin happily. Naruto had done his job. There was no doubt he was the savior of his world. That smile slowly slipped away. He had saved the world, but at what cost? He was alone, a man who had decorated for his own birthday party but didn't get to enjoy it. Even the tailed beasts were silent, the last of their energy having been expended during the final battle, plus the mental strain of being ripped from host to host multiple times in one day. Besides, Naruto knew it was only their chakra and his naturally powerful life force that was keeping him alive right now. Slowly, Naruto strained himself to open his eyes, and reflexively he let out a silent gasp. He was in a world of kaleidoscopic color that seemed to go on forever in every direction. Royal purple, midnight blue, emerald green, blazing crimson swirls of color and energy surrounded him like a blanket. Cosmic art of the highest caliber that only a select few got to see. If he had the energy, Naruto would have chuckled and scratched the back of his head sheepishly. He wasn't much of an art person, but even he had to admit this was pretty cool. His body seemed to move along with the gentle currents of energy, floating casually from side to side like a leaf would on a river. He wasn't sure how long he lay there. Time was hard to tell in a place like that, when suddenly he heard a rushing sound. Turning his head a fraction of an inch, Naruto noticed the space around him bending, twisting, like a whirlpool toward a golden ball of blindingly bright light. How ironic! Naruto closed his eyes. He wasn't sure where this whirlpool would lead him, but at least he hoped he survived. Optimism. It was good to have when your life was constantly full of shitty events. Gradually gaining speed, Naruto rode the whirlpool before plunging into the golden ball of light, and suddenly finding himself in the midst of a free fall. Gabriel frowned in annoyance, as she carefully tried to squirm her way through the seas of people in the lakeside marketplace. While she always tried to be a nice person, thousands of people all trying to maneuver in the relatively small fresh produce area of the farmer's market was enough to even begin to grate on her nerves. Not to mention how angry her brothers had her today. The only female seraph glanced down at the basket hanging from the crook of her arm, checking to see if she had everything for tonight's stew when she felt a small tug on her arm. "Ms. Gabriel?" A high-pitched voice from behind her said, barely audible above the chatter of the crowd. Gabriel turned around to look at the little European girl standing behind her, blonde hair tied into braids and blue eyes glancing downward in embarrassment at her inward-facing feet. The little girl turned around quickly to look at two adults who looked a lot like her, likely her parents or guardians, who gave her a nod of encouragement. Gabriel smiled as she saw this, one of her few genuine smiles of the day. "Oh, hello, darling." Gabriel kneeled down a little so she was eye-height with the girl. "How can I help you? I'm sorry if I'm bothering you and I don't want to be a hassle, but can I please get an autograph, please? Sorry." The girl managed to mumble out, her face practically scarlet as she patted down her pockets rapidly before finding a small notebook in her back pocket along with a black marker. Gabriel had to suppress a giggle at the number of times the girl said sorry and please. No problem at all. Taking the pad and pen, the seraph made eye contact with the girl. "May I ask you your name?" "Jessica," was the girl's answer with a happy nod. Brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, Gabriel put pen against paper. To Jessica she quickly wrote a kind message before closing the notebook and handing it back. "There you go." Eyes wide as saucers, Jessica hugged the book to her chest. "Thank you so much, Ms. Gabriel." Instinctively the little girl lunged forward and wrapped Gabriel up in a hug before the seraph could react. "You're so pretty and amazing. I'm gonna be just like you. You're going to grow up to be so strong and beautiful, Jessica," Gabriel said with a smile, giving the girl a small hug back. It was then she noticed it. At first it was faint, a small streak in the sky looking as if it originated from the sun that slowly began to grow and grow until it was a blazing, golden comet. Gabriel's emerald eyes squinted a little bit before widening as she realized it was coming straight for this sector of heaven. Frantically, Gabriel lifted Jessica back onto her feet before giving her a light push toward the two adults from earlier. "Go back to your parents and follow the angels out. Stay safe." Jessica, having turned around to see the accelerating object as well, nodded frighteningly before chasing after her parents who had been trying to wait for her despite the rushing crowd of people heading toward the exits. Gabriel looked toward the sky once more, although now finding a few fellow angels that partook in the voluntary police force had begun to take action. "Everyone evacuate calmly and orderly. Don't push or shove," came their collective amplified voices, shepherding the thousands of people out of the exposed marketplace. Gabriel let out a small sigh of relief. At least she didn't have to worry about the civilians now. Her 12 white wings exploded from her back, unfurling to their full glory in a fraction of a second as she took to the sky herself to face this glowing projectile. None of the other seraphs were likely nearby, as the meeting had ended over an hour ago, and most had long since returned home. The average angel wouldn't be able to help in this situation. Their magical power was too weak to be able to handle whatever this thing was. The object was growing closer and closer, having long since passed the artificial clouds that floated in the area above heaven, and was now mere seconds away from impact. Gabriel had seconds left. She had to do something now. High above the city herself, Gabriel's hands glowed with yellow light as a magical circle appeared above the area. It was massive, easily over 300 meters across, and was enough to cover the entire evacuating civilian population as well as a majority of the marketplace. The object flew by, smashing into the lake besides Gabriel and the people with an earth-shattering shockwave that threatened to send the 12-winged seraph flying backwards. The light barrier she had quickly constructed bent and cracked, but remained intact, saving the people from the blast that would have likely resulted in a few injuries even despite their distance. The hurricane-force gust of wind subsided after a moment, and Gabriel let her barrier dissolve, ignoring the loud cheers and clapping of the people below her who she had saved. Instead, Gabriel was focused on floating downward with control, fixing the strap of her white dress as she carefully lowered herself into the dried-up lake. A man laid in the center, a glowing cloak of golden energy around him that must have saved him from his re-entry slowly dissolving away to leave him exposed. He was shirtless, burned and injured, although the angel couldn't tell if they were prior wounds or from his descent. He had the body of a warrior, with developed muscles that reminded the angelic girl of only the most well-trained soldiers in heaven. Gabriel slowly lowered herself into the mud on the bottom of the lake, not caring if her white clothing was getting dirty, as she carefully moved over to the man. At first, she thought he was dead as not many people could survive a fall from outer space, but once Gabriel was a mere 5 steps away, the man's deep blue eyes shot open. The sudden movement was enough to shock the angel, who almost fell back into the mud in surprise. Slowly, as if every slight movement was going to kill him, the man turned to look at her with a slightly amused and dazed expression. "I thought they said angels didn't exist. You're as beautiful as they say." Gabriel stepped back in surprise, a hand over her chest in shock. That shouldn't be possible. Angels can understand every language ever, why can't I understand you? The man didn't respond, his eyes having closed with that same amused expression on his face as if this was all rather funny to him. Gabriel watched in shock as his chest stopped rising, a hand rested fondly over his stomach. Frozen she stood for a few seconds before angrily, the seraph strode over to the man and knelt beside him in the mud, her hands once more aglow with white light. Don't give up on me. The magic she had learned as a child came back to her, memories of sitting beside her father, as he watched her struggle her hardest to revive a recently deceased puppy she had found. The magic none of her brothers had wanted to learn and had fallen upon her, as the only girl in their family. Gabriel didn't know how long she was there for, but out of the corner of her eye, she could see a crowd had started to form around the edge of the dried-up lake. She could hear their whispers to one enough and could see everyone once in a while. Someone would point at either her or the alien. They didn't matter at the moment, as all of her attention was focused on this spiky-haired blonde man in front of her. Finally, after more than half of her magic was gone, and she was almost positive this was a lost cause, Gabriel finally felt a small thump beneath her hands. Then the man's chest rose again, and again, and again. He let out a groan before opening his eyes one more time to look at her with no hidden surprise. Healing powers. The man let out a hearty chuckle, a hard wheezing sort of laugh but not lacking in mirth in any way. I guess you're my guardian angel then. Gabriel wasn't sure what he said but couldn't help her cheeks from getting a little heated. The man's eyes closed again, and this time, Gabriel leapt to her feet to grab the attention of the hundreds of angels who had begun to surround the crater with light spears at the ready. Her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists, and with a loud voice that carried throughout all of heaven, she shouted an order that would save the man's life a second time. Put your weapons down. We need a medic. Get this man to the hospital. Chapter 2. God, I feel like I got hit by a truck. Nope, that would hurt less. Carefully sitting up in his bed despite the tightness of the white sheets that had tucked him in, Naruto winced in pain once more and glanced downward at the weight against his legs holding him in place. Long strands of blonde hair was spread out along the bed sheets, like molten gold pouring everywhere, as a girl's head laid on his legs. A girl, Naruto guessed she was around his age or a little older, had pulled over one of the chairs in what he assumed was a hospital room beside his bed and had long since fallen asleep. If the little bit of drool on the corners of her mouth meant anything, Naruto took a brief moment to look at her, recognizing her face from the blurry moments before he passed out. She was honestly breathtaking, more beautiful than any of the girls in his world by far, which was honestly saying something. Her face was slightly heart-shaped and had a very cute look, almost innocent in a way. Naruto choked a little bit as his eyes trailed downward. Her body wasn't very innocent at all. Somewhere far away, Naruto had a feeling Jiraiya was laughing his ass off and cheering. Averting his eyes to calm his warm face, Naruto looked down at himself. He was wearing a light green hospital gown that someone must have changed him into while he slept and had multiple tubes sticking out of each arm. Naruto lurched, barely suppressing the bile that threatened to escape him. That was perhaps the most disgusting sight he had seen in a long time. The savior of the world, but he's afraid of needles. About time you woke up, idiot. The voice was deep and gruff, perhaps even scary to some people, but to Naruto, nothing else brought a smile to his face faster. Closing his eyes, Naruto found himself in his mindscape. Once a dark and disgusting sewer, it had slowly evolved into a large forest full of giant trees like the ones that surrounded Konohagakure. Finding himself in a large and familiar clearing, the blonde-haired shinobi grinned like a fool. Oh Kurama, you're awake! Kurama, or the Kyubi no Yoko as he was more commonly known, was one of the most dangerous beings in the world. He was also one of Naruto's best friends. In the middle of the clearing stood a massive fox the size of a mountain with red-orange fur, and 9 long tails that casually swung from side to side. It had a slightly humanoid upper body, but its face had the sly smirk that could only belong to a fox. Slitted crimson eyes gazed down at the comparatively tiny human beneath him before the giant kitsune lazily held out a fist. Naruto tapped his foot against the ground of the clearing and concentrated, imagining a platform beneath him rising to life him. There was a sound like a crack as a giant tree just like the other ones around them sprouted from the earth and lifted Naruto so he was eye level with his friend, allowing the team to meet the fist bump. I've been for a while. Woke up after your glorious crash landing and I've been keeping an eye on your body, claimed Kurama as he let out a small yawn. Naruto nodded, a silent gesture that Kurama took to mean thanks, before crossing his arms. How long have I been out for? A day. Naruto leapt to his feet, his jaw agape in surprise. What? It almost never took him that long to heal, especially as he got older and grew closer to the tailed beasts. Usually between their chakra and his own powerful life force as an Uzumaki, he would be on his feet in hours from most major injuries. You might want to thank your little friend. She's been here the entire time. She saved your life after your landing and then managed to get you to this hospital in time for them to stabilize you. Kurama chimed in, a little smirk on his face. The fox had been all too amused watching the angelic girl worry over Naruto's unconscious body and had let out a few snickers when he noticed how surprisingly aggressive the girl was when the doctors had initially refused to treat the unknown individual. If there was one thing that hadn't changed since Naruto's childhood, it was how much Kurama found amusement in the awful situations he got himself in. Naruto, not knowing his amused friend's thoughts, was silent for a moment as the heavy realization finally hit him. Was I that bad? The smirk fell and Kurama's eyes grew colder. Me and my siblings were out cold, Naruto. You had no help from us in terms of healing. You died. Thank her. Kurama mirrored Naruto's position, crossing his arms like a human would. She's also the reason why they haven't attacked you. A large semi-transparent screen projected itself against the trees, giving Naruto a view of the world outside of his mindscape. The girl laying across his legs was still asleep, but Naruto's focus was more on the two guards who kept walking back and forth, glancing inside his room every time they passed by and shaking their heads in disbelief. Naruto frowned, his eyes squinted as he focused on what was on their backs. They have wings, they all do. Even her. Naruto stepped back in shock before a hand came up to rub the bridge of his nose, a sigh slowly escaping him. Wings were new to him. The only person he knew in the elemental nations who had them was Choji, and that was only temporary, and would leave him on death's door afterwards. Naruto frowned, now that he thought about it. The Jinchuriki of Chome also had wings as well. Did that mean these winged people would be as strong as a fully powered Akimichi and Jinchuriki? Hesitantly Naruto decided to ask the best censor he knew, although the look on Kurama's face told him that he was already expecting the question. How powerful are they? Do they pose a threat? Not really. These guards are barely genin, although your friend seems to be much stronger. Kurama's words eased the growing concern in Naruto's mind, and the blonde let out a breath of relief he didn't know he was holding in. Still, Naruto was slightly surprised that this girl had Kage-level power. Did that mean that there were other people in this new world that were threats, having powers close to him and Sasuke? Kurama awoke Naruto from his thoughts with a flick on the forehead with the tip of his tail. She's waking up. Good luck, idiot. Don't do anything stupid. Wait, Kuram. Naruto frantically tried to stop the most powerful tailed beast, but it was too late. He had been kicked out of his own mind. Asshole. This time Naruto's words came out in the real world, catching the attention of the girl who was still waking up and wiping the small amounts of drool from the corner of her lips onto her sleeve. Glancing up to make eye contact with him, her face lit up like the sun. Oh, you're finally awake. Thank God. Naruto cocked his head to the side. What? He had honestly no idea what the girl had just said. Despite the girl's beautifully melodic voice, the language she was speaking sounded somewhat more harsh than his own native language, which was rather flowing. Nevertheless, from her body language, Naruto could tell she was happy and was probably worried for his safety, a gesture that brought a smile to his face. Meanwhile, the girl seemed to have mirrored his gesture and had tilted her own head in confusion as well. I don't know what language you're speaking. It sounds like some sort of dialect of Japanese, but at the same time, it's different. This is so odd. Angels are supposed to be able to understand all languages. Biting her bottom lip in thought as she lightly drummed her fingers against her leg. Naruto had to admit it was a rather cute sight. Naruto thought for a second before snapping his fingers as a genius idea came to mind. If they couldn't understand each other's languages, then perhaps they could try universal signs that the other might understand. Slowly, as to not confuse her, Naruto pointed at the girl before giving a really exaggerated shrug. The girl's emerald green eyes widened and she clapped her hands together excitedly, an energetic motion that surprised Naruto but still brought a smile to his face. That's a great idea. I'm Gabriel. Naruto raised an eyebrow in confusion, having never heard a name quite like that before. Gabriel, are you? The girl shook her head negatively. Gabriel. Gabriel, are you? Naruto tried again, this time trying to break up the sounds. She couldn't help but let out a giggle. Gabriel. Naruto tried a final time, concentrating really hard of combining some of the sounds. Gabriel. The happy smile and nod he received confirmed his success, and Naruto couldn't help but do a fist pump of victory. Now are you two? Naruto introduced, pointing at his chest as he did so. Naruto. Sounds Japanese. Gabriel perfectly repeated on the first try, a hand to her chin in thought. You do have Asian features but not quite at the same time. So strange. Gabriel giggled at how Naruto looked a little bummed that she didn't struggle as much saying his name as he did saying hers. Her laugh was contagious and Naruto couldn't help but chuckle himself. The two sat in a comfortable silence for a minute before Naruto decided to ask a question that had been on his mind for a little while. Why did you save me? Gabriel wasn't sure exactly what he said, but she had a pretty good idea based off his tone. Glancing out his window, she let out a small sigh. It was the right thing to do. I couldn't just let someone die in front of me without trying to help them. It goes against what father taught. Naruto was silent, although he couldn't help but stare at the girl in amazement. Somehow, he had a feeling he knew what she had just said, and that was pretty incredible. Not a lot of people had that kind of selflessness and pure kindness in his world. Shaking his head in disbelief, Naruto winced in pain as he put a little more pressure on his left side. Be careful. You're still injured. Gabriel chided him with a stern look that didn't really look like it belonged on the girl's face. The doctors were amazed at how fast you recovered, but still. Stay safe. Naruto chuckled, that was an expression he was more used to getting. Thank you. You're welcome. Gabriel responded with a smile, once more having a feeling she knew exactly what he had said. Standing up from her chair, she glanced around the room before her eyes landed on a small white bag by the doorway. She laid the contents on the bed, a set of plain white clothes generally around Naruto's size. A friend sent these over. He's about the same size as you and one of the only people I know who doesn't have wings yet. Gabriel explained, holding up the shirt to Naruto as if she was a designer. That got a laugh from the blonde boy after he gave the girl a silent thank you. Gingerly pulling off the covers to avoid messing with any of the medical equipment around him, he carefully got to his feet. His legs, and used to standing after a full day in bed, buckled for a moment under his weight before correcting themselves. This episode though was enough to draw concern from the angelic girl. Can you stand? I'm not made of glass, pretty lady. I think I'll be fine. The girl looked a little less than pleased with how Naruto waved off her concerns before sighing in acceptance. She handed the clothes over to the shinobi before gesturing over to the bathroom a little down the hallway. Get changed. My brothers want to meet you. The two walked side by side, an extremely strange but attractive pair that garnered much attention from the people in the streets as they walked by. Naruto wasn't exactly sure what everyone was saying, but he knew they were talking about him from the subtle points in his direction and the dozens of eyes that were following him as he walked through their city. None of them were hateful or scared, as the impact of his crash had caused almost no damage due to being largely been contained by the lake and the light barrier. Instead, most of the looks were curious, interested in how a visitor from another dimension looked. Naruto smiled. He could handle curiosity, and would try to indulge the people once he learned their language. He just wasn't sure how to handle the strange looks he was getting from some of the females. His eyes glanced amusingly over to the girl walking beside him, who was walking a tad bit closer to him after noticing the strange looks he was getting as well. Naruto had noted that half of the attention was also on her, as well as the number of adoring people who cried her name happily as she walked amazed him to no end. Gabriel seemed to be somewhat of a celebrity here, her bright and sunny personality being rather infectious to everyone. Little children ran up to the two blondes, slowing them down slightly, but the smile on their faces were so bright Naruto couldn't help but mirror it. The children chatted excitedly with Gabriel before glancing at him awkwardly, unsure of who he was. Gabriel, noticing this, introduced the whiskered man and explained his situation, earning him a few gasps of amazement. The cheerful smiles and laughter that escaped the children when he gave them a round of high fives before the two continued on their way stayed on Naruto's mind as they approached the meeting place. Sunlight pierced through the stained glass windows that lined the hallway, making everything glow more brightly in a myriad of colors than it ever had before. The floor was quiet, but not silent, as two people's breathing reminded the area that it lived once, lightening up the cold weight that attempted to sit on their shoulders. Gabriel stopped before the heavy wooden door. Her eyes closed for a moment as she placed a hand against the wooden door. It was cold, threatening, and for a moment, the angel hesitated. A large hand covered hers, the rough textures caused from calluses formed over years of training feeling strange against her smooth skin. His hand was much more warm than her, and the heat seemed to fill her, lightly dusting her cheeks and driving away any cold doubts she had. With a thunderclap, Gabriel felt her wings unfold with more authority than ever before, and her golden hair blazed to life like an undying flame. The two stepped into the meeting room together, the holy light threatening to wash them away if they were to falter. They stood strong. 9 men stood before the two blondes in the doorway, varying expressions on their faces as they looked. A voice broke through the silence after a moment, and although he couldn't know for sure, Naruto had a feeling he understood what was said. Welcome, sister, traveler. We've been waiting for you. Far from the gaze of heaven, a hidden world dwelled, mirroring the human world but with a few important twists. Purple-skied and mostly filled with land rather than water, the Underworld was populated with beings of strange and unusual powers. In the capital Lilith, a man sank into his leather-bound seat with an appreciative sigh. Running a hand through his red hair as he glanced at the piles of paperwork on his desk, the man decided to shut his eyes instead of beginning on his duties. Seraphim Lucifer was a hero amongst his people, a devil king whose power was almost unmatched in the world. The former heir to the prestigious Gremry clan, Seraphim had been raised in the area right after the Great War, and had witnessed firsthand the destruction that had been left in its wake. Born with an incredible innate talent to wield the legendary power of destruction passed down from his mother, the young Gremry knew he had the opportunity to stop those who wanted to further destroy Devilkind with more bloodshed. With the help of his friends Ajuka Astaroth, Seraphim Citri and Falbium Glaciolabilas, the 4 young devils were able to lead a resistance against the old Satan faction and end the war. The 4 devils were crowned Satans and had been leading their people ever since. Seraphim sighed. He wished that someone had warned him that ruling was such a pain. His sensitive ears caught the sound of delicate footsteps walking down the hallway toward his office, and he didn't even have to open his eyes to see who it was. Good afternoon, darling. Graphia Lucifuge did not have the appearance of the strongest queen or the wife of Lucifer. No, that would be too improper. In fact, were it not for her incredible beauty and the aura of power around her, one would likely mistaken her for another maid in the castle. Long silver hair tied into a long braid was perhaps her most famous feature, but it were her silver eyes that were staring at her husband like they were trying to burn through his skull. Naturally, Seraphim did the thing most scared husbands do. He tried to crawl into a ball and hide from his wife's fury. I'm sorry, Graphia, what happened? Graphia placed down a file onto the table, her gaze icy as she watched her husband gulp and read the familiar title. Why haven't you dealt with this yet? Everyone is waiting for your response. Well, you see, Seraphim stuttered, sweating as he tried to think of his excuse for his lack of action. Ever since he had gotten the news earlier that morning during the weekly Satan meeting, Seraphim had been trying to dodge the problem and his wife. It seemed he would have to confront both now. Seraphim let out a heavy sigh that made him seem much older than he appeared, rubbing his temple lightly as he began to think. Any disturbance in the dimensional gap is a problem. The one that occurred yesterday was massive and sent a shockwave throughout the gap that connects all the world like an earthquake. Green eyes glanced out of the window of his office, an unreadable expression on his face. There's no mistaking that something came out of that void. You heard what Ijuka-sama said? Graphia's voice was as cold as ice. The being's exit point was in the middle of heaven. Seraphim barely didn't respond, his eyes still peering out the window, locked onto something he must have seen in the distance. It was only because Graphia had spent so much time with him that she caught the slight catch in his breath, the small tightening of his brow for a microsecond. Do you believe they are trying to summon the Red Dragon, or the Infinity Dragon? There was a weight to her words, a slight sense of fear hiding behind the woman's tightly pressed lips. The thought of one of the devil's strongest enemies, the angels, gaining the power of the dragons was enough to make the queen shiver. I don't know. What purpose would Michael have for summoning Great Red or Ophis? No, there has to be some other reason for this. Seraphim turned around to face the silver-haired woman, a look of urgency set on his face. Bring me Beowulf, Mathers and Okita. I have a job for them. Seraphim knew that he couldn't let himself get caught off guard. The devils would make the first move. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to attack, the instincts he had trained over the years launching into overdrive from the massive killing intent that struck him. Simultaneously suffocating, they would have driven a lesser man to the ground in an instant, and thrown him to their knees to force him to grovel. Naruto Uzumaki didn't even flinch. Cold blue eyes seemed to stare defiantly back at the 10 winged angels in the room, and for a brief moment, they could have sworn they saw a flash of crimson. On the other side of the room, the blonde-haired Ramil shifted in his chair, a small bead of sweat appearing at the top of his brow, lightly crinkling his green robes. With a slightly shaking finger, Ramil pointed at the shinobi with a frown. Why isn't the man in restraints? We have no idea of his intents. An exasperated sigh escaped the lips of his green-haired junior. Because he is not a prisoner, Ramil. We're here to hear his intents, not incarcerate him without reason, Raguel retorted, fixing his glasses with one hand and sending the indignant Ramil into a small sputter of rage with little effort. Ramil isn't wrong for once. This thing was able to survive being thrown through the dimensional gap and crashing into one of the highest levels of heaven. We cannot act too lightly around him. Seraphim commented with a small sneer, the slightly cruel attitude of the purple-haired Seraph coming through as he stared at the spiky-haired man with barely hidden disgust. Gabriel glanced over at her new friend with slight concern. Naruto was unusually quiet, his bright blue eyes switching where their gaze was locked on every few seconds or so as he tried to make sense of what was going on in the room. Judging by how he stared back at Seraphim and Ramil with slightly narrowed eyes, Gabriel had a feeling that Naruto could tell based off her brother's tones what they were saying about him. She looked across the room to where Michael was sitting with his perpetually sad eyes watching the scene carefully. He too had been silent, and Gabriel knew that whatever side her eldest brother supported would win the decision. Gabriel. The smooth, silky voice of Uriel grabbed both Gabriel and Naruto's attention, who recognized the name, and both turned around to the surprise of the blue-haired Seraph, although it didn't show for long. Somehow those pupilless eyes Uriel convened a sense of empathy that made Gabriel excited that someone was showing sympathy for her friend. Her brother's next words, although, shattered any illusion she had. Although you seem to have grown comfortable with his presence, this man is still an intruder into heaven. He is not an angel, or a deceased, Uriel began, trying to reassure his sister with a comforting smile. He's about to be if he keeps staring at me like that. Raphael gruffly commented, cutting off his brother as he and Naruto held eye contact. He instantly regretted it as his blue-haired older brother leveled him with a pupilless stare, his voice convening the no-nonsense attitude filling the meeting room. Raphael, silence. The muscle-heavy Seraph swallowed, his mouth closing with an audible noise as he tried to avoid getting Uriel even more angry. Like I was saying, he is not an angel or a deceased. He is merely a human with strange abilities. It is for the best that he is restrained and observed, for the security of heaven. Uriel finished with a smile, the same sweet-sounding tone almost luring his sister into agreeance. No, there was something wrong. There was something about those pupilless eyes today that were making Gabriel uneasy for the first time in centuries. She would not fall for Uriel's words. Naruto wasn't the enemy. Catching herself, Gabriel shook her head and took a step back away from Uriel and her brothers, almost all of whom seemed to have been swayed by the blue-haired Seraph's words. No, wait. Uriel took a step forward, reaching out to grab Gabriel when suddenly the angel found his wrist caught in an iron grip. Don't touch her. Those glowing eyes traveled up the length of the muscular arm holding him in place until he found himself staring directly into the cerulean eyes of an annoyed Naruto Uzumaki. Restrain him. Naruto wasn't sure who shouted that or what exactly they said, but he got the gist. In a blink of a second, he had moved in between the creepy blue-haired bastard and Gabriel, stopping him from touching her. It had only taken half a second after that for all of the seraphs besides Gabriel, Uriel and that blonde one on the other side of the room to spring to their feet and release their wings. The room managed to grow even brighter if that was possible as 7 light spears of blazing holy energy burned to life, each deadly point directed straight at Naruto. The chakra coursing through his body seemed to subconsciously move a little more quickly, condensing slightly as if anticipating the shitstorm that was about to hit. Ah fuck. What the hell did you do now? The gruff sarcastic voice in his head commented with a sigh. Naruto's eyes were locked onto the 7 light spears trained on him, his grip on Uriel's wrist tightening to the point the blue-haired seraph was on his knees from the pain. Not the time, Kurama. Raphael sneered at the shinobi, a sign that gave Naruto enough time to catch the light tensing of his body under his robes. Raphael's grip on his light spear tightened, and just as he was about to throw it, a voice shattered the tense situation. Wait, no! Leave Naruto alone! Cried the blonde-haired woman as she stepped in between her friend and her siblings, who looked at her like she was crazy. Gabriel! Stand down! The order did nothing to stop the archangel. Instead, the look in her eyes seemed to grow even more cold and determined. Small soft hands balled into white-knuckled fists. I said. Gabriel shut her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she let loose. Leave him alone. At that moment, every single occupant of the room seemed to feel it at the same time. It was something archaic, ancient and terrifying, like the opening of a door that had been locked for years releasing a deadly beast. Like a bolt of lightning, Gabriel was engulfed in piercing white energy that cascaded over the room and washed over her brothers like a tidal wave. The holy weapon seemed to dissolve in their hands, leaving the seraphs with wide eyes and holding merely empty fists. Even Naruto and the Bijou were in awe, letting go of Uriel and subconsciously taking a step back from the girl, whose entire being was glowing the most divine shade of gold and white. Her halo was displayed with pure pride, blazing like an undying fire, and her wings were protruding outward with authority. Wow! Naruto couldn't help but feel Kurama's comment was a little underwhelming, although he could understand what he meant. Naruto does not wish to harm us, any of us. He doesn't know our world, our politics, our situation, or even our language. Every single eye was on the only female seraph as she spoke with an authority appropriate for kings and queens. We cannot say we are God's children and follow his teachings if we are going to act out of fear every single time there is a difficult choice. Let us put it up to a vote then. Broke another voice as one man stood up from where he had been sitting the entire time. He was handsome but also rather feminine looking, with sad-looking green eyes that reminded Naruto of someone he knew. Gabriel's magic died down a little bit as she stared at her eldest brother with wide eyes. Naruto raised an eyebrow, looking at the man after sensing the change in tone from his friend. This man was someone she respected and was close to, likely a direct relative if their similarities in appearance were anything to go by. The visitor Gabriel interrupted her brother almost immediately. Naruto, she insisted, earning herself an eyebrow raise from Michael before he chuckled to himself. Yea, Naruto will be allowed to stay in heaven under the direct supervision of our dearest sister, who will be placed in charge of educating him of our world so he can become a future ally. Nay, he will be placed into prison and interrogated for information of his intents and knowledge of his world, he offered diplomatically, the sweet sound of his voice swaying a few of his siblings and earning himself a few nods of agreement. Michael glanced around the circle of stone chairs, his eyes landing on the first of his brothers. Remil's eyes burrowed into Naruto for a moment before his mouth warped into a sneer. Nay, the next seraph's vote was rather obvious almost immediately as Raphael rubbed his hands together excitedly. Nay, and I say you let my core handle it. Asshole Gabriel didn't understand exactly what Naruto said under his breath, but she had a feeling. A quick glare was all it took to stop her new friend's Raphael-directed killing intent. Everyone looked over to the next angel in line, only to find that he had been zoned out the entire time. The brown-haired ninja otaku Metatron had been curled up in his chair the entire time with a manga book in his hands, cat-ear headphones blocking out all the arguing going on. Michael's forehead throbbed in a rare sign of annoyance. Metatron! The authoritative yell was enough to literally knock Metatron out of his chair from the shock, and he slowly got up, wiping his eyes to readjust them. What? Yay or nay? Michael asked with a sigh. Metatron looked like a deer in the headlights, glancing around at all the exasperated eyes staring/glaring at him before landing on Naruto. A hand went up to his chin, and he let out a hum. He kind of looks like a ninja. Picking up his dropped book, Metatron Lack-Kids basically lifted a thumbs up. That's a yay from me. Gabriel glanced over to Naruto with a supportive smile, although the young shinobi was still very confused on what exactly the hell was going on. Perhaps it was better that the blonde didn't know his ninja background had earned him a new supporter/fan. I don't even know why we're giving him a chance. Nay. Serial cried out in annoyance, with a roll of his eyes to accompany the negative vote. Naruto mirrored the expression asshole. Although the comment earned him another glare from the nervous girl beside him to him. This is stupid. Yay/yay. Gabriel's right, we can't just live out of fear. Some of the anxiousness began to leave the angelic girl at the simultaneous responses from her smartest and most outspoken brothers, and she instantly gave the two one of the brightest smiles she could muster. That warmness instantly began to leave her as all eyes rested on Uriel, whose cold pupilless eyes seemed to somehow display some empathy to the girl. I'm sorry, Gabriel, but it's for the betterment of heaven. Nay, was his cold response, his sky-blue hair whipping over his shoulder as he turned around and returned to his seat, nursing his still throbbing wrist. Gabriel brought a hand up to her chest, the sting from that blow hurting quite a bit. Uriel, noticing all the eyes on her, Gabriel gave her obvious answer. That's a yay from me. The room was silent for a second as the situation set in. It was 4-4. Every single eye turned to the leader of heaven, whose own eyes were trained to the ground in thought. Michael's face was difficult to read, his mouth set in a straight line as he pondered to himself like a judge about to make an important verdict. Brother, the word escaped Gabriel's lips unconsciously, and Michael glanced up at the call, meeting the tear-filled green eyes with sad ones of his own. Then he met the eyes of the visitor, and it was at that moment both men were able to get a true read of the other for the first time that day. Although divided by their language and culture, both were men of character, whose desire for power and political influence was not one derived from wishing to become the dominant ruler but for wanting to be the man who could help others. Family and friends came first, and one could not simply overlook the right choice just because it helped the many. Michael was the first to turn away, a sigh escaping his lips. I leave it all up to you, Gabriel. The next word brought a dazzling grin to Gabriel's lips. Yay, yes, cried out the only female among the Seraphs as she let out a childish fist pump. We did it! Before Naruto could even react, the smaller girl had wrapped him in a crushing hug that had him surprised for a moment before he returned it. Michael Waite-Ramil tried to argue, but a single look from his eldest brother stopped the words from exiting his mouth. Michael's voice seemed to magically project itself, silencing all opposition and arguments with its authority that even Naruto managed to recognize despite the language barrier. Naruto will be Gabriel's charge. She will be in charge of his education and lifestyle until he is self-sufficient. The cold leadership facade broke for a moment, as Michael turned to face Gabriel. Good luck, dear sister. This meeting is over. You are all dismissed. As if to exemplify his point, Michael's golden wings unfolded with a thunderclap before he took to the sky. A few of her angelic siblings gave Naruto and Gabriel a quick glare, but they too disappeared after a few moments, wishing to escape the room and clear their heads after the long and arduous battle. With only the two of them left in the room, Gabriel immediately turned to Naruto and leapt up at him, launching herself at Naruto, who almost dropped the girl in surprise. So small and beautiful, Naruto was afraid he was going to crush her like a snowflake and was a little disappointed after she broke away from the hug after a little bit. Yes, Naruto. You're free, she cried out, her face practically glowing in happiness as she jumped up and down and danced to her own beat. Her golden hair whipped from side to side, hitting the taller boy in the face, but he didn't mind. He really liked her hair. Thank you, Gabriel-chan. You don't realize how much I owe you, Naruto admitted, sheepishly scratching the back of his head. Don't worry about it. We're friends, right? Gabriel responded, understanding him from his tone and body language. To him, her smile seemed to glow even more brightly than her magic ever could, and it was so infectious too, like a song he couldn't help but sing along to. Gabriel looked out the skylight window at the top of the meeting chamber, her eyes taking in the darkened sky and the thousands of stars that filled heaven's horizons. It was getting late, and hopefully all the work was done by now. Let's go home, whispered the girl as her wings unfolded themselves softly. Reaching out, she took Naruto's much larger hand with her own as her magic began to swirl around the two of them, coating them both in her holy light. In an instant they were gone. This is very over the top. The words left Naruto's mouth before he could stop himself, along with a long sigh, his head dropping slightly away from the sight in front of him in exasperation. Naruto gave a dry look at the dozens of moving and construction trucks that surrounded the beautiful and large plot of land Gabriel owned, his right eyebrow twitching a little as he did so. His eyes tried to make out the words on the sides of the vans, but soon gave up upon realizing it was the same alphabet used throughout the rest of heaven. Luckily, the cartoonish pictograms and logos were enough for him to identify each well enough. Concrete foundation company, roofing company, plumbers, electricians. Dozens of men quickly exited the premises upon the arrival of the angel and her companion. A few tried to take an extra moment to stare at Gabriel and check her out, but a quick deadly glare by Naruto was enough to send them packing. Their work was all that remained as the dozens of construction crews bolted, a masterpiece of a home sitting where there had once been an empty plot of land. A large 3-story modern Japanese style stood proudly, and Naruto couldn't help but be impressed. The triangular roof and wooden exterior was familiar to the shinobi, while the tall walls and balconies were not. The house sat in the middle of a rather large pond, with a red bridge arching across it to connect to the entranceway. Naruto turned to look at Gabriel to see the small girl was looking rather embarrassed, muttering curses under her breath in annoyance at the fact that the work crews hadn't been gone by the time she and Naruto got home. Noticing her companion was looking at her, Gabriel tried to look everywhere but at him while playing with her beautiful golden hair. You're probably thinking this is rather over the top, but as soon as you got out of the hospital, I knew you would need to find a place to stay. I wasn't expecting Michael to put you with me though. Noticing that Naruto's expression seemed to scream disbelief, Gabriel flushed and pointed a finger at him angrily. Hey, stop giving me that look. Whatever you say, Gabriel-chan. Naruto chuckled and raised his hands in innocence to the girl's accusation. Literally say whatever you want. I can't understand you. Gabriel glared at Naruto in a terrible attempt at looking annoyed while failing miserably before breaking and returning back to her usual brilliant smile. Walking across the red traditional bridge with Naruto in tow, Gabriel began to talk while gesturing so that Naruto would understand. My old house was pretty small and really western, but since we're friends, I thought I would try to accommodate you, although not to the extent that Michael was apparently thinking. Naruto cocked his head to side in confusion at the small conflicted frown on his friend's face, snapping the girl from her mutterings, and she opened the door. What's mine is yours. Welcome to your new home, Gabriel said with a smile, presenting the home with pride. Naruto couldn't help but feel a little sad as he walked into the home in front of Gabriel, his eyes taking in everything with an almost unnoticeable smile on his face. Walking into the large kitchen connected to the living room, it was a perfect family-style home that Naruto wished he had had growing up. Sitting at the white marble island in the kitchen like the one here and helping his mother cook while his father did his work in the study, Naruto couldn't help but wish he had gotten the chance to taste his mother's cooking or sit by his father as he read the newspaper. Gabriel, unaware of the mental journey that her friend was going on, glanced up at the clock hanging on the kitchen wall and gasped. Oh, it's almost dinner time. The blonde girl quickly began to pat her pockets rapidly. I'll go order something. What are you doing? Gabriel looked a little ashamed as she lifted the silver cell phone she had found in her back pocket. Dinner. Naruto's head tilted to the side in confusion, his brow furrowing in a very over-exaggerated expression that the girl picked up after a moment. Pantomiming eating something by pretending to spoon things into her mouth, Gabriel managed to get the message along after a second. Naruto pointed at the large beautiful kitchen the girl had only to receive a very sheepish and obvious look of shame, as the girl suddenly found her feet and the floor very interesting. Well, you see, cooking is a bit of a kind of not my super-duper speciality. I usually order delivery, admitted the girl after a minute of exasperated staring from her new roommate, the shame growing to greater and greater levels every moment. What? It wasn't her fault that so many great deceased chefs cooked such good food and opened up stores in heaven. Thank God her angelic metabolism kept her from getting fat and maintained her fantastic figure. Naruto, getting the gist, let out a sigh before plucking the cell phone from the girl's hand and putting it into his back pocket where she couldn't get it. Gabriel let out a whine but found herself beaten, so dejectedly she sat down at the island so she could watch her friend cook. And cook he did. It had been a skill he had picked up over the years with Jiraiya and his time living alone, but Naruto had always found cooking rather fun. While in the village, Naruto did it rather irregularly due to the existence of the greatest food stand known to man, i.e. Ichiraku ramen. Often while on missions and in places where food was strange or unknown, Naruto found himself cooking basic meals. Over time, basic meals turned into more and more advanced dishes as Naruto slowly taught himself a skill that perhaps in another life, his mother or father might have passed on to him. Gabriel watched with awe as the blonde man sharpened and handled her kitchen knife like a pro, cutting through fresh meat and vegetables she had in the fridge with such precision and ease that it looked effortless. Little did Gabriel know that after years and years of training with kunai and other deadly blades, a kitchen knife was practically a kid's toy. In fact, Gabriel found herself so enthralled in the cooking process that she didn't even notice half an hour go by until the food itself was done. Wow! Was the only thing the girl could say as she stared wide-eyed at the large plates of salad, New York strip steak and seared salmon that had been prepared before her very eyes. After a few seconds, Naruto came out of the kitchen, drying his hands on the holy crap, I'm a good cook apron she had gotten as a Christmas stocking stuffer a few years ago. Gabriel had to admit, it looked better on him. Glancing at the extremely long and expensive dining room table she had bought just in case she ever entertained guests, Gabriel couldn't help but feel that sitting on the other side would be little too impractical for two people. So instead, the little girl waited for Naruto to grab a seat before she plopped herself down right beside him, despite the fact there was at least 8 other unfilled seats surrounding them. Naruto smiled, a warm, genuine smile, as he handed her a plate full of delicious food. Itadakimasu, itadakimasu, Gabriel giggled, the words escaping her mouth almost as easily. The words were ordinary, a simple thank you for the food that was set before you, but both Angel and Shinobi knew it meant a little bit more at that very moment. Sometimes a little company was nice, especially when you've been alone for a while. The tickle of hair against his ear awoke Naruto from his slumber, his eyes opening slowly as he took in the familiar surroundings. The lights in the living room had been dimmed and only the small lamp besides the couch where he was sitting was on. On his lap sat a rather large hardcover book unlike the scrolls he was familiar with from home. His eyes looked down and stared at some of the characters on the page for a few moments, trying to remember the meanings of the words before him. He was slow, Naruto had to admit he was never a very fast learner when it came to reading and the like, but he eventually able to recite the 2 alphabet systems that had been taught to him the night before by Gabriel. Gabriel. Slowly turning his head to the side a little, Naruto was once more assaulted by the golden hair that had awoken him from his sleep in the first place. He didn't really mind though, her hair smelled nice, almost like honey and lemon. Gabriel too had a language book in front of her, although she had apparently abandoned it for Naruto's shoulder halfway through the night. Naruto silently chuckled to himself but found even that slight vibration was enough to nearly stir the girl. Devoid of the usual energy and enthusiasm and expressive emotions that usually occupied her throughout the day, Naruto couldn't help but notice how peaceful Gabriel looked while she was sleeping. Stop watching the girl sleep, you're being weird. The cold gruff voice of his closest friend broke Naruto from his thoughts, and the shinobi sputtered, "Fuck off, Kurama." Naruto tried to shoot back, but the flush of his face betrayed him. Slowly Naruto picked up the much smaller Gabriel in his arms, cradling her bridal style while trying to avoid touching her anywhere inappropriately. His friend didn't deserve that, and that was one discussion he did not want to have with her tomorrow morning. It didn't take him long to carry her up 2 flights of stairs to Gabriel's room on the top floor, with his own room lying on the other side of the hallway. Pushing open the door lightly with his foot, Naruto walked over to the large queen-sized bed in the center of the room before laying the girl down, pulling the covers over her. Gabriel squirmed for a moment from the loss of her source of body heat, but calmed down, and was in a deep sleep after a minute or two. Quietly Naruto backed up out of the room, closing the door behind him gently to avoid making too much noise. Wiping a small bead of sweat off his brow, Naruto opened up the door to his room and strode across it to the window instantly. The room was rather Spartan at the moment due to the fact he lacked almost all earthly possessions at the moment, but Naruto didn't really care. The large windows that opened out to the world was good enough for him as Naruto opened them up and sat on the sill with a sigh. There was a flare of orange chakra from Naruto's torso as a small being took form in front of him. An orange fox, the size of a medium-sized dog, with 9 long tails flowing behind him, plopped down on the edge of the window across from Naruto, who didn't look very surprised by the appearance. Kurama glanced around, letting out a noise that sounded like an appreciative hum. "Pretty nice life you've got there. Only half of the most powerful people in heaven hate you. I hate you. A nice house worthy of a Hokage. I double hate you. A pretty girlfriend." Naruto glanced over the edge, wondering if the 30-foot fall would be enough to end it all. "I should just jump." Kurama grinned, his sharp white teeth on display. "I'm just playing with you, kid." The playfulness seemed to disappear after a moment. "I just wanted to give you a word of warning. Those angel guys are afraid of you. You're an unknown but powerful enough to stand up to them at the very least, which makes you a threat. Threatened mice tend to bite, so watch your back." Kurama let out a sigh before relaxing his head onto his front paws, now laying down completely on the windowsill. "Besides, we don't know who else lies in this world yet. Are there allies out there we just haven't met yet, or are there foes that are even more powerful than these angels? Ugh, why do things have to be so difficult?" Kurama stared at his host for a moment, taking in the sight of the annoyed savior of the world. Every once in a while, Kurama had to admit he forgot that Naruto was only 17 years old. Kurama let out a teethy yawn before hopping down from the window onto the floor. "Get some rest, kid, you've had a long day." Naruto watched with amusement as the orange fox leapt onto the bed and yanked off one of the 2 pillows sitting there, throwing it onto the ground. With a relieved sigh, Kurama crawled up into a little ball onto the pillow as if he had been the one with the long day. Naruto sighed, shaking his head in disbelief, as he laid in bed closing his eyes voluntarily for the first time since before the war a few days ago. A moment before sleep overcame him, a thought slipped through Naruto's mind and he couldn't help but smile. "Hey Kurama, I know this isn't our world and I still want to find a way back eventually if I can, but I think I can be happy anywhere as long as I have people I care about with me. So let's make the most of this, I guess." All Naruto received was a snort of amazement from his 9-tailed friend before he slipped into unconsciousness. Chapter 3. A ray of sunshine pierced through a small crack in between the curtains of the room and landed atop the closed eyes of the savior of the world, waking him from his slumber. Letting out a small groan of pain, as if he had been stabbed suddenly by a kunai rather than woken up prematurely, Naruto knew trying to go back to sleep was for naught. He was already awake. Sitting up in bed with a sigh, Naruto rubbed the sleep out of his eyes with his hand, glancing over at the curtains laying his windows. They had been moved during the night, allowing the sunlight to sneak in, and Naruto knew only one culprit. Literally rolling across the bed, Naruto glanced over the edge to notice his many-tailed companion had disappeared and that the door to his room was open, allowing the bijou to briefly escape Naruto's tired wrath. The blonde-haired teen got out of bed with a protesting groan, his aching muscles providing a dull throb of pain throughout his body. Stretching his arms and shoulders as he walked down the stairs, Naruto made sure to move quickly as the cold wooden stairs seemed to be trying to freeze his bare feet. The house he now shared with Gabriel was surprisingly bare and lifeless when she wasn't there, as the girl seemed to have some kind of otherworldly charisma that seemed to light up the room. Placing his hands into his pajama pockets to keep them warm, the blonde-haired shinobi silently moved through the living room, taking a better look at the area now than he had the night before. It was only now that he realized that above the big cabinet in the living room, seemingly out of reach for the petite Gabriel, was a picture frame. Casually reaching up and grabbing it, Naruto couldn't help but smile at the photograph. A young Gabriel, maybe 4 or 5 years old, stood on the left side of the photograph with a huge grin on her face as she held up a peace sign to the camera with her right hand. On the right side of the picture was another familiar face, and Naruto almost didn't recognize the younger form of the Archangel Michael, appearing perhaps only slightly older than his younger sister, with a big smile of his own. The two stood beside the kneeling form of an older man in a white robe, his entire face not in shot due to being too large. Nonetheless, the children looked happy in the photo, and the way the man had a hand on their shoulders in a loving manner only seemed to add to the nostalgia of the photograph. Gently, Naruto returned the photo to its original place and moved into the kitchen, glancing upward at the clock sitting above the stove. 9 in the morning, maybe the smell of food would awaken his sleepy host. Opening the fridge with one hand and peering inside, the smile on Naruto's face disappeared. Damn it, he needed to get groceries. 2 hours had passed since Naruto had awoken and multiple new advancements had occurred. 1. Apparently the numbers from his world and this world were the same, so Naruto had been able to access the prices, and then only had to point at the ingredients he needed, while he was at the market in order to purchase them. 2. Kurama had managed to evade Naruto's attempts to search for him the entire morning so far, and it was actually beginning to become quite impressive. 3. The smell of bacon and pancakes had not awoken his roommate like he had initially expected. In fact, were it not for the fact he could hear her breathing with his hypersensitive ears, he was pretty sure she was dead. Glancing a final time at the clock to confirm the hour hand had passed 11, Naruto reluctantly trudged up the staircase to Gabriel's room. Rapping lightly with the knuckles of his right hand on the door, Naruto placed his ear against the wooden door. Yep, breathing, maybe a little bit of snoring? Naruto snorted lightly before opening the door gently, his eyes taking a moment to adjust to the darkness of the room. For such a small girl, Naruto wasn't quite sure how Gabriel had managed to sprawl herself out across that giant bed by herself. Her white covers had been thrown off in the middle of the night, and in her tossings and turnings, so had the white pajama the angelic girl was wearing. Her white lace bra seemed to be fighting its hardest to contain the girl's massive chest, that somehow managed to look amazing on her petite body without being out of proportion. Pale white skin, an unreal amount of bounce every time she moved, the slight silhouette of hardening now. The savior of the world had been lucky enough to meet many big-breasted women over the years, Tsunade, Hinata, Mei, etc., and could pretty much say it was never the biggest attractor for him. But Gabriel's body was literally heavenly. Naruto took a step back, literally falling into the doorframe as his hands came up to contain the bleeding from his nose. That sound, however, was apparently all that was needed to awake the refreshed Gabriel from her sleep and rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. She sat up in her bed and took a look around. Boy, was she surprised to see her roommate on the ground, draped against her door frame with enough blood escaping him that it looked like he had been shot. So of course, Gabriel, being the kind-hearted soul that she was, ran over to her friend. Naruto could only watch in awe as the heavenly being before him seemed to break the laws of gravity, as things began to jiggle in ways he never thought things could jiggle before. Before he knew it, Naruto found himself pressed up against the half-naked Gabriel, who held him against her chest thinking that he had been wounded. What Gabriel didn't understand was that by pressing her roommate against her flat stomach and in between the massive she was only increasing the rate of blood loss until Naruto eventually succumbed. Right before he passed out, Naruto looked down beneath Gabriel's bed to see the 2 crimson eyes of his best friend staring back at him. The bastard, damn, he really can cook. Those words were what eventually awoke the blonde-haired shinobi as his eyes snapped open, taking in their surroundings immediately. He was in the kitchen, sitting across from Gabriel, who was chowing down on a mini feast of her own. 14 pancakes, 13 waffles, 16 strips of bacon, 8 sausage links, a pitcher of orange juice and a strawberry to make the meal healthy. Gabriel had thankfully put on a shirt since the early morning fiasco, but a light breeze through the room made the boy realize that he had been stripped of his own pajama shirt. His upper body was incredibly defined and muscular from his hard work and training over the years, a fact that Gabriel seemed to eye every couple of seconds. You cook like this for yourself and you have a body like that? Sheesh, the girl muttered to herself as she angrily stabbed at her pancakes with a little heat in her face. Said by the girl with the super body, the irony, eh? Was Naruto's only response, unable to hear what the girl said under her breath. Gabriel almost choked on the bite of food in her mouth in surprise, having not expected Naruto to be awake yet. Nothing. Glancing away, she played with a strand of hair that had separated from the rest. Oh. I washed your shirt. It had blood on it. Naruto thought for a moment before trying the phrase he had been taught the night before. Thank you. Gabriel over-enunciated the more difficult sounds in the word, slowing down her pronunciation a little as well. Thank you? Naruto tried again, trying as hard as he could to make those difficult noises, although the accent of his native tongue was still very strong. But the brilliant smile that seemed to appear on Gabriel's face out of nowhere made the effort worth it. Much better. A light bulb seemed to turn on in Gabriel's mind as she snapped her fingers, remembering something that had eluded her earlier. Moving to the other side of the island in the middle of the kitchen, the small energetic girl reached down and picked up an annoyed orange fox whose 9 tails were swinging lackadaisically from being removed from his resting spot in front of the oven. Oh Naruto! Look how cute this fox is! Kurama gave Naruto a look that screamed, "Don't you say a word, you dumb monkey," but Naruto couldn't help the smile that came to his face. The all-powerful, crusher of mountains and bringer of tsunamis was being lifted up by a girl like a common house cat. You've taken a quick liking to her. She fed me while you were napping the day away, Kurama shot back, his crimson eyes meeting Naruto's in a battle of wills. A tick mark appeared on the corner of Naruto's brow as the blonde prepared a string of curses in their native tongue to unleash on the annoying tailed beast. Gabriel looked back and forth between the fox dangling from her hands and her new roommate as the two glared at each other comically, mock lightning sparking between the 2 eyes. You two know each other? Kurama, Naruto explained, pointing at the fox dangling from her arms to make the connection apparent to the girl. Doubting that was the word for fox from the intonation that Naruto gave the word, Gabriel turned the fox in her hands to face her, bringing her face really close to his in the process. Your name is Kurama? All the most powerful Bija had to do was nod before he found himself crushed to death in the teenage girl's arms. Why, you're so smart and cute. Naruto's eyebrow twitched at the sight of Kurama squeezed against Gabriel's admittedly giant chest, a reaction that earned a giant foxy grin from Kurama. I can tell why you like her too, fuck off. Naruto roared as he lunged across the kitchen table for his oldest friend, almost knocking over the entire breakfast he had prepared in the process. Kurama let out a small yip as he fell from Gabriel's arms and took off like an orange bullet across the kitchen. Before Naruto could chase him down and have roasted fox for breakfast, the shinobi was stopped by the small angelic girl sliding herself in between him and Kurama, placing her hands on her hips angrily. Hey! Leave him alone! I'll get you later, you fuzzy orange bastard! Naruto cursed the monster fox who had taken refuge on the couch, protected by the immovable object that was Gabriel. The girl had not moved, her hands had not fallen from her wide hips, and that same displeased frown remained on her lips. After a few moments, Naruto knew it was pointless to fight and sat back down at the table just in time to catch the clean white shirt the girl tossed him. We're heading into the city to see a good friend of mine. He really wants to meet you. Naruto, registering some of the words in the sentence, tried one of the phrases/words that he had learned the night before. Really? Yep. Time to get ready. Gabriel didn't even pause as the sudden gear change shocked even Naruto as she grabbed a pancake, tossed it into her mouth before racing up the stairs to get ready in her room. Naruto sighed in disbelief at the inhumane amount of energy his roommate had before turning to follow her, grabbing a quick slice of bacon as he did so. Heaven knows he'll need the energy chasing Gabriel around. As he slipped through the crowded streets of heaven, Naruto was glad that the city had begun to accept him slightly more, although he still got a few strange looks every now and then. Clothing-wise, he looked just like the average man strolling through the city with the trendy lightweight white cotton pants and shirt that had been bought for him by his lovely roommate. His preference would have been something orange, but beggars can't be choosers. What made the man stand out, however, was his ridiculous musculature, odd whisker marks and spiky blonde hair that was like a beacon to everyone near him. He stood a few inches taller than the average man and towered over his little roommate, a fact that he found incredibly amusing whenever she tried to see something over the person in front of her. Despite feeling more familiar in the city, Naruto still had trouble telling place from place, and Gabriel's hand on the sleeve of his shirt kept him both close to her, so Naruto couldn't escape, and a light tug usually told the shinobi when he needed to change direction. Eventually, after hopping on the trolley car system that had been installed in heaven to transport the non-flying civilians of the city, the two found themselves at their destination. Naruto tilted his head to the side, taking in the full view of the giant circular building in front of him. It was huge, probably double the size of the arena he had fought in for the final stage of the Chunin exam, but gave off roughly the same vibe. Gabriel strolled through the entrance like she was familiar with the place, and the smiles she gave the workers made it seem like she was a regular. Passing through the corridor, the two found themselves in a huge open arena, with hundreds of rows of stadium seats extending outward from the center. Naruto squinted his eyes. There were far too many seats on the inside to fit the exterior. Must be some sort of space-time jutsu that expanded the inside of the building. Walking further in, he was able to glance upwards toward the open skylight that provided the light for the entire stadium, giving the whole area a light glow. This place is called the Colosseum. Naruto glanced over at Gabriel and tilted his head to the side, trying out the word for himself. Karashima. Gabriel leaned forward, squinting her emerald eyes to see a figure standing on the opposite side of the arena talking to another man with a tray in his hand. A slight flow of chakra to his eyes, and Naruto's eyesight was enhanced at least threefold, allowing him to clearly see the man that had caught Gabriel's attention. The man appeared to be young, maybe around Naruto's age, and had blonde hair just like him, although the man's was slightly more shaggy and long. Sharing similar green eyes and skin color to Naruto's roommate, the shinobi would not have been surprised if this man and Gabriel were secretly siblings. Naruto glanced down at his clothes before looking over at the man once more, who was wearing something similar just in a black and white color scheme. Ah, so this was the donator of his clothing. Dulio! Cried out Gabriel as she ran across the arena to wrap the man in a slamming hug. Ah, Gabriel-san! Unlucky for this Dulio person, the container of nachos that was in his hand had to be carefully tossed into the air to avoid splattering the most powerful female seraph in the world with gooey cheese sauce. Lucky for Dulio, however, Naruto's quick reaction time was fast enough that he was able to catch the nachos before they fell and hit the two. Oh, good catch. Dulio commented, giving the man a thumbs up, quickly returning the hug to the girl before carefully taking back the nachos. The man held out a hand towards Naruto. Oh, hi. I'm Dulio Gesualdo. Pleasure to meet you. He's upbeat. Kurama said suddenly, causing Naruto to smile as Gabriel returned to his side. I know, right. Naruto Uzumaki. Nice to meet you. Naruto responded, shaking the man's hand. Dulio cocked his head to the side slightly, trying to place the accent while Gabriel just shook her head with a smile and a little shrug. He's learning. Dulio nodded understandingly. I see. Glancing at Naruto's overall muscular build, one that was obvious from the tightness of Dulio's clothing on him, the exorcist smiled. You look like a fighter, he asked. Do you fight? Gabriel simplified after seeing her roommate's confused look, further emphasizing by lifting her fists up like a boxer. Naruto nodded, a small smile on his face as he tried to replicate one of the words used. Yes. I am fighter. Great. Delio's smile seemed to somehow grow even wider. So am I. Wanna spar? This sounds like a really bad idea / this sounds like a really bad idea simultaneously. Kurama and Gabriel seemed to understand what the situation was about to come down to, but either could stop it. Let's fight! Naruto exclaimed, holding out a fist to his new friend. The other man mirrored the move, an identical grin on his face as he did so. This motion was all that was needed for the popcorn vendor, standing at the side of the arena, as he quickly snapped a photo and posted it on his heavenly social media account. The Traveler and the trump card of heaven were about to face off. It probably took about 5 minutes, but the stadium was packed to capacity. Men, women and children had dropped what they were doing to clamber into the stands for the free show, a casual match between their favorite Delio-sama, the most powerful exorcist in the world, and the new face in town, a man who had survived a crash landing into heaven without any serious injuries and was living with their beloved Gabriel-sama. Delio smiled, his hands hidden inside the folds of his robes, as he surveyed the now packed Colosseum, filled with everyone eager to see the man that was likely to become their next Seraph spar against the newcomer. Pretty nice crowd. Naruto nodded, his own eyes scanning the crowd himself. Although it was obvious that the people were rooting for Delio, he was pleasantly surprised to see that they were looking forward to seeing him as well. His eyes locked onto Gabriel, standing in the first row in the center of the arena, out of harm's way but still with the best seats in the house. He grinned, she was in for a show. They all were. Brushing off the dirt from his hands, Naruto casually slipped into a loose fighting stance, facing his smiling opponent who mirrored his action, hands open, right foot in front, eyes forward. With a thunderclap, Delio's 10 angelic wings sprouted from his back in all their holy glory, signaling the man's true arrival to the match. Naruto took a deep breath, allowing the gentle trickle of chakra to flow through his limbs, lightly sparking at his fingertips at the ready. This was his first taste of what combat in this new world was going to be like. A little blue flag was thrown into the air by the referee on the side, beginning the match, and instantaneously there was a blur across the field. It was only Naruto's honed reflexes as a shinobi that allowed him to dodge the ice spear aimed to disable his left shoulder, as he dodged to the right. There was a gasp from the crowd, who had barely even seen the attack in the first place and was terrified of its speed, but Naruto was just grinning. A second ice spear came for his right, but with a sweeping right hand, Naruto caught the spear with ease, spinning the long frozen polearm around his right side and across his back in one fluid motion. Spinning the spear once, he threw the projectile back toward the still stationary Delio with almost double the original speed. Delio, seemingly unfazed beside the casual eyebrow raise, raised his right hand and from nothing, erupted a 8-foot-tall wall of flames that incinerated the ice instantaneously. Hayatan and Katan mumbled the shinobi to himself, his eyes narrowing slightly in thought. Let's try and see if we can stay in base form. The demon fox within him mirrored the motion, analyzing the situation for himself as he watched from Naruto's perspective. Be careful. Seeing the opening from the exorcist's momentary blindness, Naruto dropped and struck the ground with a punch rather Tsunade and Sakura-like. Like the epicenter of an earthquake, from where Naruto struck radiated a trail of destruction that uprooted the ground and threatened to swallow everything on the field. Alarmed, Delio leapt into the air silently, floating gently with the help of the 10 wings on his back flapping back and forth slowly. It was lucky he had, as the earth beneath where he had been standing had leapt up and would have skewered him with debris if he had been there a moment too late. Naruto frowned. So those wings aren't just for show. Left. Naruto leapt to the right, dodging a blast of lightning that came barreling at him by flipping sideways, landing with a skid to the right. He barely even had a chance to stop moving as a pillar of fire erupted from the ground beneath his landing spot, almost catching the shinobi with the blast had it not been for a gust of wind chakra from Naruto's feet that gave him a quick little double jump off of the air, allowing him to change directions quickly on the fly. Landing on all fours like a cat, Naruto dropped to the ground and grabbed a small rock, launching it at the exorcist's face like a bullet. Delio, however, dodged the projectile with ease by moving his head to the side, allowing the rock to fly by him. Raising an eyebrow, Delio gave Naruto a deadpan stare. Really? Throwing rocks? Naruto simply responded with a shrug. Delio clicked his tongue in annoyance before forming a large boulder from a brown magic circle hovering over his right hand, the earth projectile quickly growing to be larger than the exorcist himself. My turn. Naruto's hands instinctively went to the side of his leg to grab a kunai only to curse lightly under his breath from his lack of weaponry. Instead he extended his right hand and allowed the instinctual flow of chakra that he had mastered as a child swirl in his hand, growing into a small hurricane of blue chakra condensed into ball form in his hand. Moving his arm like one would throw a ball, Delio launched the boulder with an incredible amount of force, and it barreled toward Naruto at speed that would make most people terrified. Naruto wasn't even fazed. Leaping into the air with incredible poise, he met the boulder in midair and slammed the ball of energy directly into the giant rock. Rasengan! There was a gasp from the crowd as the momentum of the boulder seemed to disappear instantly as the Rasengan burrowed through the rock like a grinder. After a moment, like a drill through stone, the attack along with Naruto punched through the boulder and continued to fly at the exorcist, who suddenly looked rather alarmed. Gyachier. Dulio's command came out calmly despite his moment of panic, and the light blue magic circle that appeared in front of his two extended hands instantly began to glow. As Naruto got closer, it was then the magic took hold and Naruto found himself frozen in midair, the ice magic having caught him and restrained his movements entirely. He couldn't move a muscle, but instead of being distressed, the blonde man seemed to have never been happier. Grinning, Naruto said something that sent chills down Dulio's spine. "It is me." It was then Dulio felt like he got hit by a truck as the same kind of swirling ball of energy that had just punched a hole through a boulder nailed him between the shoulder blades and swatted him out of the air. Dulio felt his head whip back as he plummeted to the ground like a meteor, slamming into the earth hard enough to form a crater as the Rasengan ground him into the earth before erupting into a dome of blue energy. There were gasps from the crowd and whispers began to travel as everyone watched with eyes wide in amazement. Dulio was the trump card of heaven, a master of the second strongest Longinus ever who had the power to literally destroy heaven a dozen times over. Gabriel was practically on the edge of her seat, her eyes in disbelief at what just happened. Casually, Naruto stepped out of the giant cloud of dust that emanated from the battle zone, coughing a little to get the debris out of his mouth. Nasty. Staring out toward the crowd, he was surprised to get a round of applause from the crowd, who had enjoyed the good battle even if it wasn't from their favorite son. Blushing a little awkwardly, Naruto waved out toward the crowd, remembering the phrase taught to him earlier. "Thank you?" Glancing up, he noticed the familiar form of Gabriel float down from the stands. Her angel wings unfolded as she captured everyone's attention from Naruto onto herself. Running up to him, she slammed into Naruto for a big hug before jumping up and down with an amazement. "How did you do that?" How do I say this?" Naruto muttered to himself in his home language, scratching his whisker mark awkwardly. He was saved from his wondering by the appearance of Kurama, who summoned himself out of the seal, on his right shoulder. Kurama yawned as he relaxed on Naruto's shoulder, stretching himself out to lay on his paws. "Kage bunshin, kawaii then hench." "Old school. No school like the old school," Naruto said with a grin, earning himself a fist bump from the old fox. Gabriel was still confused by the mutterings in the unfamiliar language between the two and stamping her foot a little to grab the two's attention. She placed her hands on her hips expectantly. "Wait, how did you win?" Naruto shrugged, an action that rustled the resting Kurama and earning him a light blow to the head from the fox's paw. Suddenly realizing he could just show the girl, Naruto placed his hands together into his signature cross-hand seal and with a light puff of smoke, formed two identical copies. Everyone who was still in the arena was still watching gasped in surprise at the identical clones the strange blonde boy made instantaneously. "Kage bunshin," Naruto explained, pointing at the two clones he had just formed besides him, as if to demonstrate their tangibility as well as their stupidity. At that exact moment one of the clones pointed at his twin, mirroring Naruto's movement. Apparently this first clone got a little too close and got his arm swatted away by the annoyed second clone, now annoying this first clone. Whipping around, both clones seemed to be angry to the point they both proceeded to punch each other in the face, dispelling both. "Fucking idiots/idiots. Commented both Bijou and Jinchuriki simultaneously, although Kurama was chuckling and Naruto face-palmed. Gabriel let out a little giggle of her own as Naruto quickly made another two clones, and allowed them to recreate his winning battle plan. One of the clones transformed into a small rock, which the second clone picked up from the ground, and proceeded to throw skyward. Now, the only remaining clone extended his hand and allowed the familiar Rasengan to form in his right palm before jumping into the air, like Naruto had to destroy Dulio's boulder. Dispelling himself in midair to represent Naruto getting frozen by Dulio's strike, all eyes turned to the throne rock that was beginning its descent. Suddenly transforming back into the original clone in midair, the clone quickly formed a Rasengan and thrust it out, as Naruto's clone had to strike Dulio in the back and end the battle. Gabriel was almost speechless. Amazing. There was a shuffle behind the two and from the dust emerged an angel, glowing in golden light, who looked like he had just been run over by a tractor trailer. Dulio's flowing blonde hair was covered in dirt, and his priest robes had been destroyed by the grinding destructive nature of the Rasengan. Despite this, Dulio seemed to only have become more powerful with the 4 glowing halos hovering over his head, and the 12 golden wings sprouting from his back. A single flap of his wings was enough to eliminate the entire dust cloud around the stadium. Indeed, that was an incredible strategy. Dulio smiled, flames beginning to beckon to life on his fists. Ready for round 2? He's grown much more powerful. Kurama frowned from Naruto's shoulder, a sight that would have looked funny if Naruto hadn't been slightly concerned. Whatever elemental power he was using before must have been activated to the second level. Sage mode time, responded the shinobi as he stepped in front of Gabriel, blocking her as he began to absorb the earth's energy as quickly as possible. Just as the orange markings were about to appear on his eyes, Naruto heard the flapping of a different set of wings from above him. Both of you power down please. I don't want any one of the spectators getting hurt now. Michael-san/Michael, shouted Dulio and Gabriel in surprise, with the exorcist straightening his back slightly at attention. as the heavenly form of Michael floated down to land beside the three beings on the ground. Naruto's reaction was much different from the two as he felt his jaw clench slightly. This would be much more of a real battle if something were to go down. Michael's smile was kind and politically neutral, his eyes appearing as eternally sad as always. Hello Dillio, Gabriel. Those sad green eyes turned toward his newest acquaintance, and his expression did not change, although he gave a little nod. Naruto, Michael, Naruto said, returning the nod although his face was just as neutral. Kurama was unusually silent, watching the scene intently from around Naruto's shoulders. You're speaking much better. Michael raised a hand to his chin, breaking eye contact for the first time. Your learning speed is quite remarkable. Shaking his head to break himself from his thoughts, Michael placed his attention on Dillio and Naruto. Anyway, I think it is obvious to all that you two are powerful and this was a good display of your power. I hope I can trust Gabriel's protection in your hands whenever we are not there to help her. Naruto didn't quite understand what the Archangel said at that moment, but his roommate seemingly did by the way she took a step toward her older brother, a look of anger on her face as her 12 wings unfolded behind her. I do not need protecting brother. Michael placed a hand up, stopping his sister's rampage with an apologetic smile. Of course not, Gabriel. Michael's eyes seemed to harden suddenly and for a moment, the sky of heaven seemed to darken. But this world is changing. Allies and enemies come and go, we must be ready for when they appear. Gabriel was unusually silent as her brother spoke, her eyes stormy. Michael gave the other two men a wave as his wings slowly began to flap, lifting him into the air. Good match, boys, enjoy the rest of your day. And like that, he was gone. I don't know how I feel about him, Kurama said, breaking the silence after a moment. Naruto nodded, his jaw setting into a small frown. Agreed. Dusting off his hands, a smile returned to Dillio's face as he glanced over at Naruto. This was a nice sparring session. We should do it again. Yes, it is nice, Naruto said with his own smile. It was always nice meeting true warriors who were also kind. They were difficult to find no matter what world you were in. I'll see you two around, Gabriel, Naruto. Dillio said his goodbyes before he took to the air himself, his own relatively new angel wings flapping rapidly as he disappeared in a few moments. Bye, Dillio, Gabriel said, waving until her friend was out of sight. Once he was gone, however, she turned her attention to her roommate and friend, hopping up and down in excitement. You didn't tell me you could fight, Naruto shrugged, while Kurama began to chuckle. Oops. Gabriel shook her head in disbelief and glanced around. Almost all the fans had left the stadium and the afternoon was going to be over soon. Might as well begin the wind down for the night. Come on. Let's go get some food, said the angel as she grabbed Naruto by the wrist and began to drag him out of the stadium. Gabriel likes food. Although Naruto said the comment as an innocent observation, he did not understand the connotation as the girl with him immediately stopped in her tracks. It was then Naruto felt the coldness began to seep into his body, as if someone had just used the Reaper Death Seal and had just summoned the Shinigami to come take his soul. Slowly, Gabriel turned around, a fire alit in the girl's eyes as she walked up to the ninja with her hands on her hips and rage forming an aura around her. What you try and say? Naruto swallowed. One part of him wanted to laugh at the 151 centimeters, 5 feet, tall girl trying to intimidate him, 183 centimeters, 6 feet, tall and made almost entirely of muscle. The other smarter part of him wanted to go smack the living hell out of the stupider part of him that thought that doing anything other than apologizing at the terrifying girl in front of him was the right move. Naruto no say a thing? Naruto tried his best to calm down the girl, his hands raised in innocence. Gabriel gave him a good hard glare before turning around and beginning to walk out of the stadium. Good. That's what I thought. As Naruto watched her walk away, he glanced over at Kurama who was watching this scene in amusement and slight horror. Scary. Man, you're lucky her hair doesn't float. Brat. The comment earned the monster fox a strange look from his Jinchuriki, but before he could question him, Gabriel turned back around. Naruto. You're coming, right? But something in her tone left no room for debate. Yes, Gabriel, Naruto responded as he quickly closed the distance between the two of them, finding his step beside the happy angel girl. Kurama let out a snicker from his front row seat. Whipped. Colors. The world was filled with a myriad of colors as far as the eye can see, twisting and spinning like a kaleidoscope for all of eternity. For almost all, the dimensional gap was overwhelming and suffocating, as the nothingness within the space between worlds threatened to crush any foolish being that so much as stepped foot into the gap. For most, this space was a death sentence. For Ophis, this place was home. A young girl seemed to float in the middle of space, seemingly standing still on nothing, as her long black hair cascaded down her back. Cloaked in black Gothic Lolita fashion, the young girl's gray eyes stared at the only other presence in the dimensional gap with a strange combination of apathy and annoyance. Her pointy ears seemed to twitch at the mighty roar the giant red dragon let off in the distance, as the sound seemed to radiate throughout the void. This was not the silence that Ophis wanted. That foolish dragon simply would not leave her space and continued to act like an flamboyant idiot with his flips and tricks. Frowning, Ophis felt the green energy within her begin to seep out beneath her feet in the form of snakes, but just as she was about to launch them at the target of her annoyance, she stopped. The energy slowly began to recede as the infinite dragon god turned to her right, her gray eyes instantly catching on to the faint trail of golden energy floating throughout the gap. With a thought, she drifted over to the trail and carefully ran a hand through it, only to nearly dissipate it entirely. Her eyes traveled upward, to where the trail began to extend into the gap. This was new, this felt powerful. Her interest piqued, she began to follow it, flying beside the trail of energy as it twisted and winded throughout the dimensional gap. Flying past the realm of the Shintos, Norse and seemingly every other pantheon, Ophis continued to follow the stream of energy until it stopped directly in front of the crossroads between Earth, the Underworld and Heaven. The energy trail had faded at the last moment, and could have led to any of the three realms. From which realm the energy trail had either eliminated from or traveled into was impossible to tell. Ophis frowned, once more annoyed, as she stared at the three glowing orbs that represented the entrance to the three worlds. Whatever had left the trail through the gap was powerful, very powerful, in order to even survive the dimensional gap for that long, and even leak excess energy. In order to even survive the gap unassisted required immense amounts of power, nearing some of the higher level gods. This being might have been so powerful it might help her finish Great Red once and for all. I will find you, and with that, the infinite dragon god reached out a hand in order to enter the realm before her. Disappearing in an instant, there was an eerie silence radiating throughout the area. A new player just entered the game. What if Naruto the strongest angel in high school DxD? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel. And leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.